Fair enough.
Well, I find that the female orgasm is particularly good at, say, internal alchemy, rather say male, like you mentioned, charging talismans would be a more outward form of occultism, where a woman
so you're saying more of a bringing in.
Right.
Okay. That's cool.
The way I kind of look at female orgasm is like the ultimate surrender, like the ultimate kind of accepting, of another, right? And they say even like the biological things that happen when a woman has an orgasm. And some people, say that maybe this is true or not, but the cervix dips down into the reservoir of semen that's collected in the vagina and actually sucks it up into the uterus and things like that, right?
I've seen video of that.
Yeah, I've seen
videos of that.
Yeah, I've seen it. Like there's a camera. They captured it on camera. It's like, I don't know. I see it kind of almost as like the ultimate acceptance or the ultimate surrender. And that archetypally female is receptive.
When you say archetypally, what do you mean exactly?
Like, the woman accepts the semen.
So, for example, a man in a passive homosexual act could be related?
I guess.
Okay. And Crowley used that himself. It's interesting to see when he's taking it, when he's giving it, when he's having ritual sex with Victor Newberg, particularly, and that's interesting that when he chose to receive visions, he was getting fucked, and when he was trying to evoke energies, he was fucking. This, I think, is significant, and I think that it's significant to talk about, but it's also one of those huge issues in especially male culture where you have the idea of penetration as equivalent to ownership or domination to a certain extent, and I think that's a very problematic ideology that is essentially the root of most misogyny and homophobia that exists right now.
I also see, like what you were saying about lost my train of thought. Oh, well, because the man in the situation is displacing their own sexual urge for orgasm, right? Like the man is delaying their orgasm in order to allow the woman to have the orgasm, right? A lot of times. So you're kind of putting your own pleasure on the back burner in order to allow the woman to have more pleasure. And it's almost like an act of worship toward the woman.
Well, I think that's problematic, though. I think that is problematic to take a worshipful idea of another person. I mean, I think that's why one of the reasons that Crowley introduces the idea of Babylon as the ultimate unattainable, because you have that as your object of worship, and different partners can be different manifestations of that. But to worship a human being becomes problematic because then you have expectations of them that they can never really live up to, basically, I think.
But when you're in a radical situation, you take on more than what you.
Oh, certainly. In a ritual context.
In a ritual context.
Yes.
We're talking about ritual context, right?
Right. But it's. I'm only stating from my experience of these workings. You have to have very clearly defined lines when this happens, and it's an important thing. It's actually very similar. I think that part of the reason that a lot of people in the OTO and the occult are into S&M is because there's a certain amount of bleed over there, and it's the same situation. Like I've been in a long-term S&M relationship, and you have to. The hardest thing and the most important thing is to make sure that it stays in the bedroom and does not bleed over into your interactions in day-to-day life. And that's a huge issue. It's a huge issue in most S&M relationships, and most people cannot sustain that kind of detachment. I think that actually ritualizing the sex act in a certain way helps keep it separate, because it creates sort of alternate space in which that sort of thing takes place. But at the same time, I don't know, it's one thing that never becomes clear unless it's actually discussed openly, very specifically with particular ground rules laid down and all the rest of it with a partner.
Well, I think that it's the greatest mystery that we have available to us, so that's maybe why there's so many.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, it brings us back to what I was saying at the beginning. If we're created in the image of God and God creates and this is our creative act, then of course this is going to be where we find the most depth and the most chance to go wrong. Crowley's definition of evil is essentially error, and his description of the four great devils that he sees in Liber 418 are the misinterpretation of religions and religious ideas. So as a corollary of that, we can see that if sexual desire is misinterpreted or misused, it can be a horrible degradation of something that is meant to be spiritually uplifting.
To be honest, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what we're talking about. So, honestly, if I were to take a shot in the dark, as you so put it, I'd say, if I think I know what we're talking about, then I'd say it has to do something with yin and yang, almost like the balance aspect.
Okay.
That's all I.
Alright, cool.
I know these tend to be like if you're just sort of new to a lot of the ideas, there's so much involved.
Yeah,
yeah, there's a lot to take
in. Of like knowledge you have to have before I get
exactly. Yeah.
So I'm still just trying to take it in. That was not a joke.
Well, do you want to go first?
Okay. I think there's my research on this is limited by a few obvious factors, but I think there's too much made about the sort of limited physiological difference between men and women. The female orgasms that I have observed have not been that noticeably different externally in terms of what I'm looking at. From any, it doesn't seem to be too different from what my experiences internally. I mean, I have very rarely been multiply orgasmic, and the women I've been with have been multiply orgasmic more often. But even that, it's sort of like you can tell when it's the last orgasm, and especially if you've had a few, it seems to be like it's equally debilitating, and there seems to be probably an equal amount of fluid, although it's produced at different times, and so it doesn't seem profoundly different, especially if the man has done work to extend and delay his orgasm, because then it will be more likely that he's multiply orgasmic, and if the woman has done similar work. In terms of having a product that you can use to apply to the altar or a towel or something that you can go this and then magic. That's different, but in terms of attaining some sort of exalted state, and it's equally surrender for men and women, I think. Although I'd like to imagine myself as conquering every time. You know, you give up a certain amount of yourself to the experience. So yeah, I think the applications are probably similar.
Okay.
Well, I think my big point is that it's far easier